Okay, so hello everybody. We are there for a conference that our guest Andreï Maidanski has accepted to give us today. This conference has for title. Uh, the activity-based approach in sovietical philosophy. And first, it will, as you see, this conference will be in English because Andreï Maidanski doesn't speak French, and most of us don't speak Russian. So the only solution was to make it, unfortunately, in English. Uh, but some of us speak Russian, so if it's needed, we could call them to help and the translation from Russian to French and French to Russian. As I said, first, very thanks to Andreï Maidanski. Andreï is a professor of philosophy in Belgorod, in the University State of Belgorod, in Russia, of course. And he is a big specialist of Ilienkov and sovietical philosophy based on activity approach. And he is also writing many articles, books about Spinoza philosophy, Descartes and Hegel's philosophy. Uh, Delga, Edition Delga, are involved in this philosophy since we have published the collective book whose title in English is Practical Essence of Man, the approach of by activity in late sovietical philosophy. Yeah? This has been published last year, and it has been edited in English by Andreï Maidanski and Vesa Oittinen, and it's about 11, I think, author, all philosoph. So this is one point for the Editions Delga and this philosophy. And the other point, we have been involved in the translation of two of the books of Ewald Ilienkov, because two of us, which are there this afternoon, has accepted to translate these two works from Russian to French, especially two of them, Georgi Kobakidze, which is a student in the University of Toulouse, which making a thesis on Ilienkov works, and who translate now for the edition Delga, dialectical logic, from Ilienkov, and also, and many thanks to Georgie, of course. And second is Charles Comay, who is here also, and who accepted to translate also for us another work from Ilienkov. This is the dialectic of the abstract and concrete in Capital of Marx. And Charles is a philosophy professor, and Charles, of course, and Georgi speak Russian and French, of course. And many thanks also to Charles. And okay, so this is what I wanted to say. Second, another thing is this year is the centenary of the birth of Ilyenkov, and there has been a celebration in Russia. And, maybe Andrei will speak about. And okay, so this afternoon, Andrei will speak about 20 minutes or more, it's up to him. And then he will answer to the questions we have sent to him in advance, so he can prepare it in English. And so I think we can start with this with your conference, Andrei, if you agree, and we are listening to you.
Thank you. I'd like to say many thanks for your for your invitation to participate in your seminar. And first, I'd like to answer some questions I have received from the participants, and the questions from Georgi were the first. And how does the activity approach challenge the doctrine of reflection? I think that the activity approach challenges only the contemplative doctrine of reflection, or sensualist doctrine. But the Marxist activity approach is the next stage in the development of the theory of reflection, created by this metaphysical contemplative materialism. Marx by no means rejects the materialist principle of reflection as such. He reforms and improves the old theory of reflection, which we also find in Lenin, for example, when our senses are copying, photographing the material world, etc. Marx introduces into the process of reflection an intermediary between our senses and the outer world, and our senses and sensations, and on the one hand, and the external nature on the other hand. This intermediary or medium is the objective activity, not spiritual one. Subject and object are only poles of activity, like the north and south poles of the earth. This was very well shown by Alexei Leontiev, the Soviet psychologist, in his controversy with Sergei Rubinstein. In humans, subject activity develops into labor. At this higher stage of activity, the highest form of reflection arises. That is conceptual thinking. And the division of labor into material and spiritual leads to emergence of science, that is theoretical cognition. Science discovers and reflects hidden forms hidden from the senses, from our sensations, cause-effect relationships of things, and universal laws of nature. That is, if briefly, the relationship between Marx's activity approach and the theory of reflection. We have indeed we have two theories of reflection: activity theory of reflection and contemplative theory, and that is the choice that is for materialists today. The second question was about Kant's role, and in reference to Rubinstein, and in Soviet philosophy. Of course, Kant was a distinctly activity philosopher. And in Russia, Kantianism had the most powerful traditions. Before the October Revolution, all Russian universities taught philosophy by neo-Kantians. And Sergei Rubinstein and philosophy professor Valentin Asmus were brought up in this environment. And in turn, they infected Soviet students with Kantianism or neo-Kantianism. Of course, it was a modified Kantianism made up or masquerading as Marxism. Asmus willed that a portrait of Kant be placed in his coffin right near his heart. And the last issue of the journal Studies in East European Thought is dedicated to Asmus's work. In Rubinstein, the place of Kant's a priori conditions of cognition or transcendental forms is taken by the innate structures of activity. Through them, through these structures, external influences coming from the environment are reflected, as he used to speak, through them, through these structures of activity, like just as in Kant, the influences from outside are reflected in the a priori structures of consciousness. As well, it is very similar to Rubinstein's approach, but Rubinstein changes the priori structures by the structures innate to the body, structures material, structures of activity. This schemes of active orienting in the world, or in animals too. After the war, a powerful neo-Kantian were emerged at Moscow University. Its leader was Alexander Zinoviev, who emigrated in France, and not in France, in Germany, but he visited France too. And Alexander Zinoviev was a close friend and drinking buddy and an aggressive opponent of Ilyenko. Zinoviev founded the Moscow Logical Circle, which included Mamardashvili and Shchedrovitsky, and later Eric Yudin. The best young philosophers of this generation or 50s. There are accounts of Yudin and Shedrovitsky in Titarenko's chapter in our book. In the 50s, there was a fierce debate between the Hegelian and Kantian wings of Marxism, between the parties of Ilyenkov and Zinoviev. They were peers in their 30s at that time, but the rest debaters were 5 or even 10 years younger. I explored this almost forgotten story in one of my articles. It is forgotten even in Russia now, but it was a very important debate in 50s and even determinative debate and very important for forming all the Soviet young philosophers.
Excuse me, do you remember the title of the article by chance? Or if you will remember it later, I would be very glad to have it.
It was the title, how was somewhat ironic, how Evald Vasilievich debated with Mirab Konstantinovich.
Okay, thank you.
This subject matter of the article was the debate around doctoral dissertation of Mamardashvili, where Ilyenkov was an official opponent, and they clashed together. And it was a very impressive discussion. I found it in archives, Moscow archives. Both parties, Zinoviev's and Ilyenkov's, developed the activity approach in the theory of cognition. But whereas Zinoviev, as for Rubinstein, thinking had some inner structure, distinct from the structure of the object of thought, Ilyenkov defended another principle, the principle of the identity of thinking and being. And in thinking, there is not a single category, not a single logical form that does not express or reflect some real relation of things. It was Ilyenkov's thesis. Neither thinking nor practical activity brings anything of itself into their objects, as the Kantians argued. Practical activity and thought only reveal certain aspects of their objects in practical contemplation, or causes and laws of their being in theoretical thinking. That is briefly.
Là, il y a désactiver le son, mais si je désactive.
To the second question, the third one, about the deeply social nature of activity, and do you think these two approaches, the Soviet activity approach and new materialism, can be compatible? As for the new materialism, I'm almost unaware of it, sorry, but when you say that activity is deeply social, you certainly mean human activity, but the activity approach is not limited to social life. It extends to the understanding of all the reality of the world as a whole, of all nature as substance and subject, in Ilyenkov's term. On the basis of the activity approach, Leontiev created a theory of the evolution of the animal psyche, which was presented in his book that is under translation now to French. What is its title? The development of psyche, of course, and the questions of Charles. The first questions, it is very long formulated, but it's called that according to Lenkov, would you then say that according to Lenkov, words from thoughts in a rather strong way, language being a production of the social environment in which the actions of the subject take place. Lenkov in no way in no way believed that words from thoughts, God forbid, but it is also wrong that thoughts born together with words. Thoughts are previous to words, and Lenkov wrote that thinking, its ideas, and all the ideal is formed in the work of the hand, that is in the practical transformation of nature. The language of real life, that's Marx's and Engels' expression. The language of real life is the first native language of thought, and verbal language is only the second, but I would add that the secondary doesn't mean that less important. Otherwise, I believe that verbal language is a higher and much more perfect form of thought compared to the language of real life. But Lenkov, I am not sure that Lenkov agree with this. There was the discussion between Vygotsky and his student Leontiev in the early 30s about this problem, about the role and of the word in the formation of consciousness and thought. And this question was not finally resolved in the activity theory up to date. Lenkov discusses the relationship between language and subject activity, activity in his article Hegel and Hermeneutics, the problem of the relationship between language and thinking in Hegel. This is one of Lenkov's best pieces for my taste, and it has recently been translated into English in the volume Intelligent Materialism. It is the collection of Lenkov's articles on Hegel in Brill, edited about 5 years ago. The next question is on consciousness and activity. It's a series of questions connected with each other, and the question is about neuropsychological development. Malinovsky, Lenkov's opponent, proved that nothing happens without external inputs. But of course, this is quite right, and nothing happens in the world at all. No, there are no process that can be performed without external inputs, and no one single developmental program can emerge or be executed without them. I think that Ilyenkov also understood this simple truth. But it hardly helps to solve the riddle of the emergence of consciousness. According to Ilyenkov, human consciousness emerges in the process of a child's practical communication with an adult. That is, in the process of mastering the simplest cultural tools such as spoon, soap, and clothes, and so on. If we call consciousness something else, for example, the sensation of light or the feeling of hunger, then such consciousness is certainly present in animals, in deaf-blind children, and in newborn child, even before it is born into the world. And Ilyenkov doesn't call this physiological reactions consciousness, and doesn't call them mind and even psyche. There is nothing human in them, yet zero human. They are not even animal psyche for Ilyenkov, in Ilyenkov's view. The animal psyche serves for orientation in the external world, in space. Ilyenkov understood consciousness as a function of orientation in cultural environment, in the world of things transformed by human labor. Each such thing, an artifact or even stars in the sky, has its own cultural meaning, or many different meanings, and these meanings are ideal. They are neither visible to the natural eye nor audible to the ear. To perceive them, these meanings, requires a special psychological lens, a higher function we call consciousness. Consciousness is something like a glass. Glasses we put on our eyes to see the hidden ideal meanings of things, ideal glasses. This understanding of consciousness doesn't strike me as very broad, as Descartes supposes. On the contrary, it seems very narrow and specific. Consciousness emerges lately. It requires 1 or 2 years collective activity. And I think that is not only or simply key to the materialist conception of consciousness, but it is the very heart, the essential core of the practical materialist conception of consciousness. And it absolutely doesn't depend on contemporary or any future neuroscience, but it might help neuroscientists to understand the cerebral tools of consciousness. For this purpose, it is necessary to understand well the nature of consciousness, the concept of consciousness. Otherwise, a scientist may spend his whole life searching for the neural basis of some other mental function, which he mistakenly calls consciousness, some qualia, for example. It is not consciousness in Ilyenkov's sense. But in Soviet philosophy and activity psychology, there were many different conceptions of consciousness, and most of them were weak, so it hardly makes sense to compare them with Ilyenkov's views. But it would be interesting to compare Vygotsky's theory of consciousness and especially the late years, late Vygotsky concept consciousness with the Ilyenkov and Leontiev's view on consciousness. It seems to me that very significant differences will be found here, especially in the understanding of the function of the word in consciousness. But this is a difficult problem, and it requires to preliminary research, serious and deep. The next question about the presence of ideal in the objective world. How does the material world existing outside our heads can support ideal features? Man doesn't bring ideal features into the world from himself, Ilyenkov considered, believed. Man merely reveals the laws and causal relations of the external world and uses this ideal or ideal.
Là, il y a le texte en français qui apparaît, c'est vrai, mais qui ne, je l'ai agrandi.
Ideal features, if you will, in the process of labor. If man has...
Il y a ce sang anglais une fois, il y a ce...
if man has poorly understood the laws of the external world, then his ship sinks, his organism becomes sick, and the state perishes along with the people. In such cases, we can say that the external world refuses to support ideal features of human activity, and the material world supports only that which corresponds to the real nature of things, which reflects this nature. Everything else is rejected by the world in the most pitiless way sometimes. The next questions from Michelle. It is a question about the difference between Marx's Tätigkeit and Praxis. Is it that Soviet philosophers of activity make this difference? In Russian, this difference is much more clear than in English. The Russian word деятельность is very close in meaning to Tätigkeit. And the English word activity seems too broad. In Russian, as in German too, there is the word активность, the full equivalent of activity, and nobody used активность to translate Tätigkeit, for example, only деятельность. In Marxism, the term practice denotes exclusively material activity, the transformation of the external world and people's economic relations. The sphere of the practical is what Marx calls the basis of social life, the productive forces and the productive relations of people. No one of the Soviet Marxists, as far as I know, called spiritual activity practice. So all of them saw the difference between the concepts of activity in general and the practical activity practice. The next question is about the Anglo-Saxon pragmatism, Peirce, etc. Was it known by Soviet philosophy? When I was young, student, we had such a philosophical discipline. Critic of modern bourgeois philosophy. I took such an exam at the university, and there we also studied pragmatism, but very superficially, not in details, and there were no translations of Peirce's works, for example. Of course, among Soviet philosophers, there were those who studied, says Peirce, but they didn't play any prominent role in our philosophical community. But Dewey was very popular in 20s, and there were many translations into Russian, but he was known only as an educational theorist. He came to the USSR, but after his participation in the Trotsky political trial, his books were banned and withdrawn from all Soviet libraries. The next question is about Bakhtin, philosophy of language, which is really very important development, but I'm not sure that of Marxism. But of course, he was a critic of positivist semantics, and this was his point of touching Marxism. In the last 10 years of Bakhtin's life, a large group of admirers gathered around him, and they scrutinized literally all of his writings. And when I was at university in the 80s, Bakhtin was already a recognized classic of philosophical literature and literature interaction. But personally, I didn't find any impressive philosophical discoveries in his works. Perhaps the problem is me and not Bakhtin. The next question is about Lenin of materialism and imperial criticism, and his dialectical philosophical notebooks that were written 5 years had been after. Certainly, in-depth reading of Hegel and neo-Hegelian literature had a very beneficial effect on the quality of Lenin's philosophical thought. The philosophical notebooks show a tremendous progress of Lenin as a philosopher. Lenin here started to talk about intelligent idealism and stupid materialism, and in fact, he virtually confessed that at the time of his battle with the Marxists, he, like all other Marxists, didn't fully understand Marx's main work, The Capital. But if you ask me what contribution all the philosophical notebooks have made to world philosophy, I will answer none. It is the work of an outstanding student and nothing more. I would not put Lenin next to Ilyenkov, let alone the titans of world philosophy. And the question of Edmond, did some Soviet philosophers of the activity-based approach extend the notion of reality as activity to time as an anthropological montage corollary to praxis? Probably not. At least I can't recall any such works on time in Marxist tradition, Soviet tradition. The next question is about the concept of de-objectification, which is mentioned several times in the book, in Alexander Hamidov's chapter about Batishev's work. You know that the young Marx had such a term, Entgegenständlichung, translated as de-objectification. He uses it only a couple of times in his notebooks of 1844. In one place, he speaks of the de-objectification and degradation of man. That is the loss by the worker of the objective world created by his own labor. And in Soviet philosophy, this term de-objectification, or in Russian, it's распредмечивание, became very popular. It was used in a sense very far from Marx, in the sense of penetration of thought into the hidden essence of its object. When with some such as Batishev, when he left Marxism for existentialism, the term took on some cosmic meaning, but you must have to mean to understand that Batishev was not Marxist at the time when he discusses this problem, and he was certainly an activity theorist, but not Marxist activity theorist, but rather existential philosopher. The later Batishev was busy inventing original concepts a la Deleuze. I didn't waste my time reading his writings, if to be true. And the last question, can we establish an equivalence between de-objectification and abstractions? Practically true or practically false? I don't see that connection. I'm afraid I have nothing useful to say on the subject. Well, that's all I like to say.
Many thanks, Andreï, for this very rich answers. I know that Victor Carrion joined us, and he is a publisher and translator of Ilienkov in Ecuador. He translates two books of Ilienkov in Spanish, and published it in Spanish world. Okay, so many thanks. Could we ask you some more question, or Andreï? Yeah, you understand? You understand me? Yeah. You hear me? Hello? Do you hear me? It seems you don't hear. You hear me? No? there is a problem. You hear me or not? It seems we can. You don't hear me. People can speak. There is a problem.
Maybe we can write it in chat.
Okay. Now it's okay. I didn't hear you, and you don't hear me. No, the question was, could we put some other question, or have you sometimes, or not a lot, I think, but could we ask you some question more?
Questions or your own reflections?
Yeah. No, I wanted to ask you some other question about you mentioned in the book the Mexican philosopher Adolfo Sanchez Vasquez. And I would like, because we spend some times in our workshop on this philosopher, I would like to know if you make if you have you can point some difference between the praxis philosophy of Sanchez Vasquez and the Ilienkov philosophy approach towards activity. And if it's different, what kind of difference could you tell us?
I heard only the name of Sanchez Vasquez.
Yeah.
Because I'm not acquainted with his writings. They are not translated into Russian.
Yeah, it's not translated. And what about also the question of the purpose of your colleague David Backers, who resume in fact the activity in the sense of Ilienkov as the elucidation of the relation between subject and object, either between the thought and the world. Are you agree with that?
My friend David interprets Soviet philosophy and Ilienkov in particular through the prism of analytical tradition. He compares Ilienkov with Wittgenstein and some other analytical philosophers, and he frequently treats Ilyenkov's concepts in the spirit of analytical philosophy. For example, the concept of practice. His interpretation is very broad, and of course, when we include into the concept of practice the language practices, Wittgenstein and all some our бытовые habitual practices, then Ilienkov becomes incomprehensible, and Marxist concept of activity, of praxis must be separated from the analytical concepts with the similar terms but not similar meanings. But David not always means this distinction, and he confuses sometimes, as it seems to me, the concepts and Ilyenkov's texts when we read them through some inadequate, I think, lenses, immediately become vague and sometimes even incomprehensible. But Ilyenkov himself was a fierce opponent and critic of analytical tradition. He called all the philosophers from this tradition positivists without exception. Of course, if we want to understand Ilyenkov adequately, we must use his own language, his own terms, and don't fill his terms with the meanings which are very, very far from Marxist meanings.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Andreï. Maybe you somebody want to ask a question to Andreï. I don't know, Victor, Georgie, Charles, Michel.
Great installation. A hammer and serpian is now. I don't know how is it.
Yeah, Victor, there's a hammer behind.
It's a picture of the Soviet artist Gelikoshev.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
Have you some question to ask to Andreï Maidanski? Michel.
In your text, your interview in the review Marxism and Science, you make a difference between a prophet and the scientist, which is the same person, Karl Marx. But I'm not convinced by this separation. Why? There is really a prophetic tendency in the philosophy of Marx. But now, the situation of the world conduct us necessarily, I think, toward a prophetic approach of world. Because if we refuse to make some speculations about the evolution of the world, we are completely condemned to death. So the restriction of the scientific perimeters of Marx seems to me legitimate, but insufficient. You understand what I'm...
Insufficient, yes.
What can you tell me about that?
I fully agree with every word that prophet doesn't mean bad and I mentioned in my interview that utopias, even utopias, not only may be very useful, very deep, or maybe I wrote that in some other text. I'm not sure, but we need in our practical life, in our political struggle, we need prophets which can lead people. But I only would like to separate prophecy and science. This is different forms of thought, and there is nothing good when we confuse, when we integrate prophecy into scientific theories, not predictions, but exactly various kinds of prophecy. Sometimes prophecy might even help scientists, but anyway, the prophecy is something by its nature different from science. So Marx, as a theorist of revolution, is a very important figure in European culture and in Soviet culture. But I don't think that we should оценивать, estimate or his political views with the scientific measure, scientific means. They can, for me, they cannot be proved scientifically from the own Marxist platform, from the materialist understanding of history. This is Marx's discovery and great stage in social science, in philosophy. But for me, his political views are contradict his materialist understanding of history. But this is too long topic to discuss it briefly.
Thank you very much, Andreï. And in the same idea, what do you think about the possible articulation between the Ilienkov philosophy and effectively the link with social preoccupation for you and for Ilienkov? I mean, if the representation that Ilienkov allow of the praxis of the activity could have a resolution in the organization, you know, of the praxis at the world level. Is this some possible link, possible articulation in Ilienkov mind, or do you see this kind of links between the philosophy and the social yeah, the social level, you know.
Selenkov was not a cabinet theorist. He always wanted to take part in practical activities, political activities, and in pedagogical activities, but he had no chance in social atmosphere of Soviet Union to express his views about the way that Soviet Union went. It was not the way to communism in Lenkov. For Lenkov thought that Soviet Union develops according to Bogdanov's project, not to Lenin's one, because the main point, the two main points of Ilyenkov's communist program were solidarity and self-activity of people, of masses of people. But Soviet state was not good place for any self-activities in political sphere. Ilyenkov, especially after Brezhnev coming to the post of general secretary, Ilyenkov really suffered. His favorite book at that time were Orwell's 1984, and he, I guess, he felt himself close to the hero of Orwell's Utopia, Smith, and Ilyenkov was unhappy, and we can see this from his letters to his friend Zhdanov. He was very unhappy, and he wanted even express his wish to let philosophy, to бросить left philosophy for some other practical activity. And at that time he was engaged into the project with deafblind children. That was the only practical activity that was accessible for Lenkov. At that time he was outsider, he was even outcast after his two Italian affair and his expulsion from MGU, Moscow University. He couldn't even teach philosophy in universities or in public, on some public places. He felt himself lonely, for his friends like Batishev, his pupils, left him, and after the Prague events especially, many Marxists, many young Marxists became anti-Marxists, and Ilyenkov was very несчастный. Unfortunate and unhappy. At that time, he suffered, and that we can read this suffering in his eyes. If you look at the late portraits of Ilyenkov, we see this.
Yes.
If I may ask a question.
Yes, Georgie want to speak.
Yes, thank you very much. This is very informative. My question is partly theoretical, but more so historiographical, because it is very difficult really to situate Ilyenkov in the categories of Marxism that we have: Soviet Marxism, Western Marxism, etc. And in that sense, I wanted to ask you about the ontological dimension of activity theory, because from what I understand, it's a sort of linked to Spinoza's monism and the parallelism of attributes. So you have the res extensa and res cogitans, but they do not interact. So you need something that mediates between the two sort of ontological strata, and that would be activity and labor in particular, right? And I wonder, given the sort of foundational split between Soviet Marxism and Western Marxism, where the latter, meaning Western Marxism, develops in a direction that Balibar has called materialism without matter, right? That abandons matter in an ontological sense and only talks about historical materiality or social materiality, referencing, of course, the thesis of Feuerbach, where Marx says that matter as such is a scholastic debate, and we need to move. And in that sense, Ilyenkov with activity theory sort of, I think, maybe returns to this ontological dimension, although it is mediated also very much through anthropology, because it is activity that then plays into the theory of personality, etc., right? So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about this ontological dimension of activity theory, and if it helps anyhow to situate Ilyenkov in these different categories of Marxism.
Well, you used very proper, very right term, the dimension, ontological dimension, because Ilyenkov defended the principle of identity of thinking and being, and activity is the link between them. This identity is not a formal identity, A equals to A, but this identity is a transformation with the help of activity, by means of activity, the transformation of thoughts, of the ideal into the material, and vice versa, of the material to the ideal. So any form of activity, absolutely any form of human activity has two dimensions, ontological or material, maybe, and the ideal, the gnosiological, epistemological. And activity is the way to overcome dualism. If some Marxist or any other philosopher speaks about ontology as separated from theory of cognition, as two separated disciplines, that means that the hidden dualism lies here in the basis of his philosophy. Ilyenkov standard for monism, for strict and very severe monism, and any ontology which is different from the theory of cognition is impossible for Ilyenkov. Is a wrong approach. And activity is the only means to unite thinking and being in the concept of practice. Practice is truth as it is. It is a transformation of thoughts into being. its ontology and theory of cognition united.
Victor, want to speak?
Yes, I have a question about the conception of Ilienkov activity in the context of his dispute with Mikhail Konstantinovich Petrov, because Petrov in his writings, he says that he opposed the reproduction to the creation, and says the reproduction is the war or stability, or is all the negative things, and the creation is the disorder, the anarchy, the positive things, the individuality. And Petrov attacks the German classical philosophy, saying that Fichte and Hegel integrate the object in the subject and makes the subject one object more. Is the subject is only other object. And Ilienkov, who read these writings, he makes critical annotation and says that the position of Petrov is wrong, because the position of Spinoza, Hegel, Marx, Lenin is that the subject is another body, is a body among other bodies in the nature, in the social. I don't remember quite well who was those say, but I want to ask Andreï Maidanski how they see this the critique that Ilienkov makes to Mikhail Konstantinovich Petrov.
Yes, thank you for the question. I have a special work, special article discussing the polemic, very interesting polemic between Petrov, the Rostov thinker, and when I was at Rostov University, Petrov was also he can't teach. He couldn't teach students. He was лишен
Exempted. He was
deprived of the right to teach in the end of 60s. And indeed, there was such story that Petrov asked Ilienkov to write a review of his book Art and Science, and Ilienkov wrote not a review but remarks at margins of this manuscript, and very critical, very even angry, very angry. And of course, I surprised that Petrov couldn't predict the Ilienkov's reaction. And Petrov was a Kantian and Anglo-Saxon analytical philosopher together. He was such a mixture. And Petrov criticized Hegel and the Western culture as the best traditions that Ilienkov defended were the object of Petrov's criticism. Except this, Ilienkov couldn't agree that Hegel is the line of degradation of philosophical thought, that Hegel is a formalistic, schematistic philosopher, as Petrov depicted Hegel, and Kant is much more deep and useful philosopher than Hegel, etc. Ilienkov was very discouraged by this manuscript, and he refused to write a review that was needed for publication of this manuscript, and the book didn't see the light of the day. The book Art and Science was published only in post-Soviet times.
1995.
There are many other interesting moments, but too much.
And you, Andrei, you are engaged, it seems, in the publication of publishing of complete works of Ilienkov. There is still a lot of things to publish in Russian, or how does it work?
Yes. Right now, the 8th volume of Ilyenkov's complete works has completed, and it will appear in April. It includes his works on the history of dialectics. This is Ilyenkov's own favorite project, his child. The many five volumes of the history of dialectics from Heraclitus to Marx, but it was the academician Dynnik that was an enemy, Ilyenkov's enemy, and Dynnik was a teacher, a professor of supervisor of Petrov. Petrov couldn't defend his candidate thesis because Dynnik said no, it's bad, it's not scientific, not a good work. And Petrov went to the army училище, not institute, but the lower school, army school at some Yeisk, very little town in the south of Russia. And when Dynnik said no to Ilyenkov, also 3 chapters of Ilyenkov for the first volume on the ancient dialectics, on the principle of the identity of thinking and being in the ancient dialectics. The second volume, the chapter on Spinoza, and the third volume, the chapter on Hegel. Ilyenkov couldn't publish all these chapters, and some of them were included into dialectical logic, the later book, but now in the eighth volume we can read these pieces, these brilliant articles as they were written in authentic form, no corrections, no any editing. And his second dissertation is also included in the eighth volume on the German classical philosophy, as well as his early works on the history of dialectics. And so on. The next volume will be dedicated to Ilyenkov's social writings. None of them, almost none of them, were published. And even two articles on Maoism were absolutely dissected and reduced, and the most important things were зачеркнуты.
Cut out.
Were cut out. So Ilyenkov's social writings were not published, but they were published after, some of them were published after in post-Soviet era, but in next volume we'll get them all together, and we have Ilyenkov, the social theorist, in this volume. And the next volume will be about Ilyenkov as the educational thinker and his aesthetics, devoted to his aesthetical views and articles, also not published for different reasons. All his published works are included in the first six volumes. The next volumes include his archive works. Some of them were published nowadays, but a good half of them were not published at all. And the last volume will contain his letters, his many reviews, dozens and dozens of reviews and remarks to Lukács, to Bloch, to different thinkers, Soviet and non-Soviet. Very interesting reactions that were written not for publication, but for institute needs. It was the поручение, commands from above to Ilyenkov to write this or that review.
Thank you very much. In the book, in the collective books, there is many names of sovietical philosopher which are mentioned by you, but also by your colleagues. And what except Ilyenkov, is there many philosophers which must be discovered, and that you think it's as you say, it's constitutes like a gold reserve of the philosophy, I think. What about the other philosopher? Once you say me that the philosophy approach by activity was very diversified, as the structuralism was in France, for example, diversified. And what about the other authors? And you cite in your article Naumenko and Mikhailov, I think, as very interesting. Is there is the other one which are mentioned in the collective books as the same level of interest, or what do you think about that?
I'm not sure that I understand every word of your question, but I didn't meet the works you are interested in. Perhaps they existed, but I can say nothing. I can say nothing useful in this direction.
Okay. And what about do you think there is a kind of a revival of this this philosophy in Russia, or is it quite the same that in the 80s, when this philosophy disappeared from Soviet Union? Is there today some attraction on in Russia about this philosophy?
There is no soil for the revival of the best traditions of Soviet Marxism now in Russia. I'm skeptical about such possibility. But there are some young people that are interested in and that participate in Ilyenkov's readings and different activities. But if there is no historical soil for the broad movement such as Marxist thought, I'm afraid that my generation was last in the observable future to continue these Marxist traditions.
Okay, thank you. Was there some other question from?
Yes, I could ask one, but I already did, so maybe somebody else wants, and then I will wait for the next.
Okay, we listen to you.
Okay. So first question was very technical. You mentioned the review of Bloch by Ilyenkov, and which is supposed to be upcoming in the forthcoming publications of his selected works. But you also digitalized his works in the website Caute, no? So I wonder if that exists there, the review. I would like to see.
The website Caute.ru
Yes.
was stolen by pirates 5 or 6 years ago, and I have no access to this website. And my my mirror of this website is now closed because of some problems with domain TK domain Caute.tk, but I'm going to renew my website and to place many new Eliankov's works to it when I will have enough time for this work, for this hard for me. It is a hard work which requires months of time, but my work on Eliankov's complete works didn't give me such free time to use it for the website right now.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it is very important work, so thank you for that, and I hope you will get the chance to put more there. And I just wanted to follow up on Edmond's question about could there be a revitalization of Soviet Marxist thought in Russia? And I guess not only Soviet Marxist thought, but in general, philosophy right now in Russia is in a pretty bad state. What I've been following the latest developments with what happened with the widow of Zinoviev and the demands to test philosophers of the institute on lie detector tests, etc. And I wonder, the situation seems to be a bit worse than in Ilyenkov's time, because right now the things that these people are saying, the so-called patriotic philosophers, seem even worse than what was going on during the Ukraintsevs and other that type of people's times. I wonder if you see also this difference between, like, or if you see similarities between what's happening right now and what happened during Ilyenkov's time.
Right now, we have a trend to follow the Western trains of thought and analytical or some other right from the university. Marxism is a very periphery, is a far periphery of the for young philosophers. So some of them are enthusiastic in Marxism due to the popularity of French Marxism and such name Italian, such names as Negri or else, or they are interested in Western Marxism more than in Soviet Marxism, and almost nobody scrutinizes Marx. What is the necessary condition to be Marxist? To study Marx's writings, it demands years and years, but nobody, except of some political activists, no one of philosophers, young philosophers, are engaged in Marx studies, serious Marx studies. Their Marxism is very superficial for me. And it is not serious Western Marxism and not Russian Marxism at all. That is my opinion.
Thank you.
So many thanks. You have one more question, Michel, maybe?
Yes, I was very interested by your text, especially on the passage on Naumenko. Is he translated in English? Because in French there's no translation.
editor of Historical Materialism Journal, Sebastian Budgen, asked me to write a summary or proposal for editorial purposes on Naumenka's book, a brilliant book for monism as a principle of dialectical logic. I have done such work, but no information about the further perspectives of the translation, of English translation of this book. But if you ask me which text is the most important and is not translated, that is Naumenka's monism. I would say that this book is at Lienko's level, is written at Lienko's level, but it appeared in Almaty in Kazakhstan, small number of copies, and it is inaccessible even in Russia.
And do you think there is the rights to translate this book are available, or it's?
I know a little Naumenka's wife and his daughter, but we in about 15 years ago, we had a discussion or a clash with Naumenka concerning the concept of thinking body, which Ilyenkov ascribed to Spinoza, and Naumenka обиделся.
Was offended?
Didn't want to, but our personal relations were broken, totally broken after this clash. So I can't help to discuss the question of rights, but I'm sure, as far as I know, that it would be absolutely free of charge to edit the translation of this book. It is very important for Naumenka's family to continue the line of thought of their father and husband.
Yes, it's important information. Well, it's maybe late, but if there is one or other question, why not? If Andreï is not tired, do you have some question or? So, and you maybe you have some question, Andreï, not?
I'd like to appreciate all for the interesting questions, and it was a pleasure for me to.
Yeah. So we will trying to implement as we can these authors, and because we are involved since many years in a workshop in around philosophy of the praxis, which is very close from I think this sovietical philosophy, and we will continue to this to this task. Okay, so if nobody has no more question, we can thanks a lot to Andreï and to get the contact, and if we have some mutual questions, and to continue those works. And I hope this complete works of Ilienkov will be very soon available also. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.